all for joining us on this snowy spring evening. Hopefully warmer weather will be here to stay soon. I hope you all are staying warm in the meantime. As a reminder, this is the Denver chapter of the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, also known as CRES, and our mission is to support a 100% renewable Colorado through education, engagement, and connections and networking opportunities across all of Denver. We are a statewide nonpartisan nonprofit, and we are just one part of CRES. We've got chapters all over the state and encourage you, especially while we are still in this virtual environment, to check out their meetings and events as well. So what to expect tonight is a few announcements from myself as well as from Johnny Rogers, who is our Director of Policy. And then we will turn it over to Wil for our feature presentation about energy efficiency in the cannabis industry. And then, as always, we will finish up with a Q&A. You can ask a question by typing into the question chat box. You can also go ahead and raise your hand. So we look forward to hearing from you and having this be an engaging discussion. And if you would like to, we would love to have you as a member. Please feel free to learn more about CRES or become a member at our website, www.cres-energy.org. We also want to share your feedback or hear your feedback. We know it's been a long time since we've seen you in person, and we've missed the opportunity to network and get feedback on the events real time. So if you have any advice for how we can improve our virtual experience for you, any speakers you'd like to hear from, or just any comments in general, please feel free to share that feedback with us. You can email us at mdcres@cres-energy.org, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you would like to support us in other ways besides membership and feedback, we always welcome your donations. You can donate on our website via Venmo or by changing your charity to of choice on Amazon Smile to CRES, and we'll get a proceeds of all your Amazon, a portion of the proceeds from all of your Amazon online shopping. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Johnny.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight for another great event. I'm Johnny Rogers. I'm the Director of Policy for the CRES Metro Denver chapter. First, an update from the State House. There's a lot of activity going on this year, but I've selected 4 pieces of legislation to talk about. The first, Senate Bill 21-200, title Reduce Greenhouse Gas Emissions, Increase Environmental Justice. I think this is a really exciting bill, and if you have to pick one to call your elected representative and encourage them to vote for, this is it. So HB 1261 was passed back in 2019, setting greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets for the state. This bill puts teeth into those targets. It requires the Air Quality Control Commission to establish regulations on a economy-wide basis with sector-specific emissions reduction caps that will need to be met in order to keep us on track to hit our greenhouse gas reduction goals. There's been a lot of good plans released by the governor's office and elsewhere in the state. However, I think this is an important legislative push to help us actually meet those targets. The other 3, first is a bill I think I talked about last time about updating electric transmission infrastructure, effectively requiring utilities to join regional transmission organizations. This bill has been getting a lot of work done. It has passed the Senate this week, headed to the House. There are quite a few amendments in there now. I'll need to spend some time researching and give folks an update later on. But the whole goal is trying to promote a more regional transmission system and a state entity that would help to provide oversight of those investments. There's been a lot of criticism that it actually removes regulatory authority and might result in overbuilding of transmission infrastructure, driving up people's rates. But on the other side, there's a lot of push that without these investments, we won't be able to actually access the renewable energy potential that is elsewhere in the state or with our neighbors in the West. The last 2 bills here, the first is updating the gas demand side management programs. that would make things like solar thermal and energy efficiency and transitions away from natural gas perceived as a more cost-effective investment. The current criteria through which the utility determines those metrics are very dated and continue to favor a perpetuation of the natural gas infrastructure. This would help us move away from that. This has also been met with some opposition from industry, as you can imagine, but we're hoping to build a strong coalition of support to see these important updates go through and be applied in the regulatory process. And last would be a study of community choice energy, which would give local governments, municipalities, the ability to sign contracts with independent power producers that could provide them with clean energy at a rate that is lower cost than their utility, while the utility continues to manage and is compensated for maintaining the distribution system. This is just a study of this concept. It would not actually be enabling legislation. I think it's a really worthwhile endeavor to collect more information on this topic and determine what are the best options for Coloradans to achieve their clean energy goals while also maintaining affordable rates for customers across the state. Next slide, please. A few things going on at the Public Utilities Commission. Xcel filed their clean energy plan to be 80% renewable by 2030. That was filed at the start of or end of last month, and it would actually achieve an 85% carbon reduction compared to their 2005 baseline. So exceeding the requirements that were set in that bill I mentioned earlier, House Bill 19-1261. Really exciting stuff, but the key questions to ask are, can we shut down coal plants even more quickly? Can we do this in a way that is more affordable? And where are these energy resources going to be built? Can we really emphasize and prioritize investments in local distributed energy infrastructure that can also provide more resilience to the electric grid, create local jobs and other system benefits? The power pathway is kind of part and parcel with the clean energy plan, new transmission lines that would be needed to bring in wind and solar power from the eastern plains and south of the state to help meet those renewable energy targets. Again, important to have balance in terms of what are prudent costs that are going to be expended, and is this the best and right way to do it. But in combination, those two plans are very exciting, certainly require scrutiny, and I encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in more information or how you can get involved in submitting comments to the Public Utilities Commission as those are evaluated. And that is it from me. Next slide, and I look forward to the presentation tonight.
Before we get on to our key presentation tonight, I do want to invite you to join us back here in May. We will be hearing all about electric vehicle research and infrastructure planning from Bill LeBlanc. He works at eSource, and eSource has actually worked with the Colorado Energy Office to create an electric vehicle growth, education, and outreach roadmap. So very excited to hear about the future of EVs here in Colorado and beyond in May. And without further ado, I am very, very excited and honored to introduce you to Wil Mannes. He is here from the Colorado Energy Office to speak to us about energy efficiency and the energy impacts on the cannabis industry. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time tonight, Wil, and can't wait to hear the key presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining to learn a little bit about what the Colorado Energy Office has done in the cannabis space over the past couple of years, and then discussing kind of what next steps are. Again, my name is Wil Mannes. I'm a program manager here at the Colorado Energy Office, and I helped assist the director within our office on the Colorado Cultivators Energy Management pilot program, which is why we're all here. So next slide, please, Greg. So before we dive into that, I just wanted to take a step back and talk about what the Colorado Energy Office is exactly, which at the end of the day, if you're not aware, we're a non-regulatory department within the governor's office. with a mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and consumer energy costs by advancing clean energy, energy efficiency, and zero emission vehicles to benefit all Coloradans. So translated, essentially we're looking to help the state achieve our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and save folks money while advancing again clean energy and energy efficiency and getting more EVs out on the road. And a little deeper dive into our office, we're really made up of 4 different units, you could think of them as. So we have our weatherization assistance, so that's for low income Coloradans. We have our public affairs unit, which deals a lot with the legislature and also has intervening power with the PUC. Then we have our transportation, fuels, and technology unit, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about the EV goals for the state, and that's really driven through the transportation, fuels, and technology team here at the Energy Office. And then last but not least, there's the Buildings Innovation and Energy Finance unit, and that's the unit that I'm under and what the Cannabis pilot program is housed under. But we really tackle energy efficiency, renewable energy adoption in the agricultural sector, in the K through 12 sector, the cannabis sector, the industrial sector. We also have the Renew program, so the residential loan program, as well as energy performance contracting. So really a lot packed into the BDFI team. Next slide, please, Greg. So I wanted to start by giving a little background kind of around how the work we've done over the last several years within the sector has come about. But really, before I dive into that, I wanted to give you an outline of how our office usually approaches and engages new markets and sectors. I really relate it to how teachers approach teaching new concepts at the end of the day. So we start with the basics, start at the beginning. We're learning those core concepts of the material through the conduction of market research reports. So that really allows us to learn those concepts, and we then utilize the findings through those reports to develop pilot programs to address barriers to those efficiency gains and renewable energy adoption. So I kind of think of these pilot programs as our version of doing the homework. We use those key takeaways again, outlined in those reports, and then apply them kind of at a smaller scale. So again, related a lot to the homework analogy. But this approach really helps us examine what works, so what we know, what doesn't work, what we thought we knew, and ultimately informs potential large-scale program offerings through our office, or our version really of taking a test would be sending out those large-scale programs and providing those to Coloradans across the state. So with that being said, in 2018, we really took time to learn the basics. So we did a market study report to really examine the energy burden that is in the cannabis sector currently. And as you can see here, the sector was estimated to consume around 2% of electricity generated here in Colorado, a percentage that has ticked up a little bit closer to 3% now, with the real boom of the industry since even 2018. We also look, what are the competing market dynamics out there? So the market's become increasingly competitive, with wholesale prices having dropped around 50% since retail sales started back in 2014. So quite a drop there. Then we also obviously look, what is the typical energy cost burden for these cultivators? Now this can vary, but the average is right around a third of all operating costs. That can vary down to 20% up to 50% sometimes in these cultivation facilities. And last but not least, we want to figure out, okay, what are the barriers to increasing energy efficiency, measure adoption, renewable energy adoption, so that this industry can really grow sustainably moving forward. And we found that really the end of the day, there are multiple barriers, but a glaring need for technical resources to become available for a large portion of the sector to utilize, and that's what we really focused on with this pilot program offering. Next slide, please. So before we dive into the pilot program, the ins and outs of that, and how our office really attempted to fill that resource gap, I really think it's important just to have a general understanding of the cannabis plant's growth cycle before we get too far down the road here. But understanding this cycle really provides us with some context as to why this plant is so energy intensive at the end of the day. And the energy used per square foot actually rivals that of operating rooms. Or another way to think about it would be through the lens of home energy use. So it's estimated that cultivation facilities can be up to, I think it's 18 times as energy intensive per square foot as the average home here in the United States. So a lot of energy being utilized to grow cannabis. Also, please keep in mind that no matter the stage, and we'll work through these stages, airflow, CO2 levels, temperature, humidity, and then lighting levels must be really delicately balanced to achieve optimal yields and ensure success for a cultivator. Commercial grow operations utilizing plant stems, oftentimes from what's called a mother plant. That's happening more and more. So that all resulting plants from that mother plant will be female and genetically identical. They're essentially cloning the mother plant. Really, these cultivators tend to find a specific genome that works, and they really stick with it. During this phase, which is called propagation, which can last really anywhere from 3 to 14 days, tissue samples from the mother plants are rooted in soil and are subjected to high humidity. So we're talking 70 to 80% humidity levels, between 18 to 24 hours of light per day. They obviously need adequate ventilation and consistent temperatures in the mid to upper 70s, dipping into the low 80s at times as well. But alternatively, cannabis facilities can utilize seeds in place of this plant tissue. Folks might be more familiar with that. But propagation is really becoming more and more common in the sector and with commercial grows as well. So after this propagation phase, the plants go through the vegetative phase, which can range really anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. In this phase, the plants are subjected to that same 18 to 24 hours of light per day, those same 70 to 85 degree temperatures, and the humidities drop just a little bit to 60 to 70%. So once we move through the vegetative phase, then we hit the flowering stage, and that can last really anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks, and usually requires about 12 hours of light per day. Still need those comfortable 70 to 85 degree temperatures, so those Florida temperatures. But we can drop down the humidity just a little bit to around 40 to 60%. So when you put all these cycles together, on average, it takes between 120 to 125 days. And as you can imagine, takes a significant amount of energy. As we'll see a little later on, really the opportunity to adopt energy efficient equipment can significantly decrease this energy usage, and in turn, those overall expenses that are incurred by cannabis cultivators as well. So multiple benefits here, but another key consideration to keep in mind when thinking about cannabis energy efficiency opportunities would really be the type of facility that the cultivation is taking place in. Next slide, please, if you don't mind, Greg. So to that point, an estimated 75% of all commercial grows here in Colorado occur indoors, So you can think warehouses, larger buildings, places like that. And these indoor facilities can eat up to 5,000 kilowatt hours per kilogram of output that's being produced over this 120 to 125 days. Alternatively, we do have some greenhouses here in Colorado. So those are estimated to make up around 20% of all grows here within the state. And they can reduce energy consumption by up to 75% in some cases when you're comparing those to indoor facilities. And as you can imagine, this is mostly due to a decreased need for artificial lighting, and you also get some alternative HVAC and dehumidification options, which we'll cover here in a bit as well. Then to round out cannabis cultivation here in Colorado, we can expect to see right around 5% of cannabis cultivators utilizing the great outdoors exclusively, which, as you can imagine, requires minimal energy usage. Really, at that point, you're just needing the sun to come out and irrigation. Next slide, please. So I added this slide just to give you all a little clearer picture really of how energy tends to be utilized in indoor facilities in particular. Again, those make up about 70 to 75% of all grows here in Colorado. With HVAC and lighting here, as you can see, those are eating up almost 90% of the energy that's being consumed at these facilities. Ventilation, cooling, dehumidification, the HVAC side eats up about half of it. And then lighting up to right around 40% at the end of the day as well. So hopefully that's a good visual, and just to keep in mind as we're working through this presentation as well, that indoor energy use really has become quite the burden. So just keep that in mind as we work through these slides. And next slide, please. So, as I previously mentioned, that market study that we did way back in 2018 outlined some key barriers to efficiency gains within the cannabis sector. Most notably, again, that lack of technical resources that are available to a fairly significant number of the state's cultivators and electric utility providers as well. So to help address this issue, we designed a pilot program to help rural cultivators and rural co-ops or electric utilities access much needed technical and educational resources. So you might be asking, why rural cultivators and rural co-ops or electric utilities? Or really, rural cultivators were targeted because of the estimated, it's right over 1,000, about 1,050 at last check-in or so, licensed commercial grows here in Colorado. Around 750 of those grows currently are able to access some sort of technical or financial resources through their utility provider. So they fall within Platte River Power Authority territory, XL Energy territory, or Black Hills Energy territory. And to unpack that a little bit more, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Colorado's utility service provider geography, those three providers are located in more urban areas on the eastern part of the state, or what we like to refer to as the Front Range. So those remaining 300 or so cultivation facilities that live in rural utility provider territories, currently those utilities just don't have the capacity, the cannabis-specific knowledge base, or funding to provide cultivators with dedicated technical assistance. Oftentimes, they only provide limited rebate offerings, and usually those are through lighting. And as we've found also, they may not have strong existing relationships with the cultivators that are in their territories to begin with. So we saw this program really as an opportunity to assist those rural cultivators and utilities while also helping to inform some future engagement strategies within the sector for our office and the state as a whole as well. Next slide, please. So, program design. So to assist the rural cultivators and electric utilities, we rolled out the program design you can see here. First, we looked to develop those rural electric utility relationships. So specifically, we identified and executed 5 rural utility partnership agreements with utilities that are actively looking to engage cultivators in their territories. We did reach out to over 16 rural co-ops, and then we're able to secure MOUs or memorandums of understanding with 5 of those rural utility co-ops. So next, we conducted 15 energy assessments or audits, whichever way, however you want to call it, and then 15 renewable energy assessments as well. So each participant received 1 of each. We had 15 participants total. Then we summarized those findings into hopefully easily digestible audit reports and renewable assessment reports that we then reviewed with each cultivator. And we found not only through this, but just through previous program experience, that if you're getting those 30 or 40-page audit reports, oftentimes they'll just sit on the shelf. You don't really know where to start. So we made a concerted effort to make these easily digestible, and then we went back and reviewed these reports with each cultivator to make sure that there's a clear understanding of what we identified, why we identified what we did, and potential next steps as well for them to take. And then finally, we provided each of those utility partners with an energy management strategy for them to use moving forward so that they can stay engaged with the program participants and also have a roadmap. As you all know, Colorado is all about those roadmaps. So we developed these kind of as a roadmap for these rural utilities also to engage other cultivators in their service territory, and just as a document of reference for them moving forward. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the pilot began with a kickoff meeting. This was back on Halloween, actually, in 2019, with the program's administrator. So these assessments, renewable and energy audits, were actually performed by a third party. That was our boots on the ground. They're professionals within the industry. They developed these reports, met with the cultivators, and then outlined what we found and everything I had mentioned also on the previous slide. By December 19th of 2019, the program again had executed those memorandums of understanding or MOUs with 5 rural utilities, but as you can see here, those ended up being La Plata Electric Association, San Isabel Electric Association, United Power, Colorado Springs Utilities, and then Mountain Parks Electric as well. So once these MOUs were executed, we began identifying and then recruiting cultivators with the assistance of these new utility partners. We really relied heavily on these utility partners to identify and then quote unquote recruit these program participants. That allowed us to account for any confidentiality concerns that our utility partners may have run into. Obviously couldn't disclose those customers to us, so we kind of gave them a packet to reach out directly to them to see if they were interested and secured participants that way. By March, we started performing those energy assessments or audits. As you can see here, La Plata Power, La Plata had 8 participants. SIEA or San Isabel had 4, and the remaining 3 utilities 3 utility partners, each identified and enrolled one grow within their territory. But it is important to note here that we did develop assessment allocation criteria for all of these different utilities. But some of our partners either had identified one cultivation facility in their territory, or they agreed to provide some of their allocated audits and renewable energy assessments to La Plata and San Isabel, who really hit the ground running and were able to engage and enroll more cultivators in their territories. So even with the COVID restrictions, which required on-site protocol developments, we were able to provide all 15 of those grow operations with those energy assessments by early June. Same with the renewable energy assessments. And then we were also able to deliver those utility energy management strategies that I had mentioned a little bit earlier to all of our utility partners as well. Next slide, please. So the fun stuff. But before we dive into what those audits uncovered, I wanted to note again that these 15 audits were performed in different cultivation facilities. So if you remember, I said there are indoor facilities, greenhouse facilities, and then outdoor grows. Of our participants, 6 of those were solely greenhouses, and the other 9 were in indoor facilities. So at these sites, we focused again on electricity usage and efficiency opportunities. So we did not identify natural gas opportunities at these sites. This program really was designed to provide those energy assessments and audits to participants, but also to provide support to those electric utilities. But it is of note that of the indoor facilities, not much natural gas is really being utilized at those for heating. And we'll cover why that is here in a little bit. In the greenhouses, they did have some heating, but less than half of them actually had natural gas lines out to their sites because they are in these rural territories. So we covered the vast majority of what was out there to uncover, but that's definitely an important note. When it was all said and done, those 15 audits uncovered kilowatt hour savings potential of over 1.5 million kilowatt hours. So quite a bit that's floating around out there, and that's just in those 15 sites that we were able to audit. But however, due to the different sizes of each of those grows, I think more really could be gleaned from a direct comparison of the greenhouse and indoor averages as opposed to the overall energy usage there. There was just a lot of variation in the size of the operations. So using this approach, when it comes to lighting, greenhouse participants consumed on average around 69 to 70% less electricity per square foot when compared to indoor grows, while consisting of actually 70% of the total audited space. So using a lot less electricity per square foot, but larger facilities overall. As you can see here, 50% of the audited greenhouses were within recommended lighting levels, while indoor facilities hovered right around 44%. And seeing as we know that lumens at the end of the day really are for humans, we used PPFD, or photosynthetic photon flux density, is the fancy term for it, to determine light levels, which really PPFD measures the amount of usable light that actually reaches the plant at the end of the day. So cannabis can use light that really falls between 375, 400 to 700, 750 nanometers on that lighting spectrum. So can utilize more light than humans can actually see at the end of the day. You can also see here that 33% of greenhouses utilized LED technology compared to just 22% of the indoor facilities that we audited. This low LED utilization rate really, I think, could be chalked up to the fact that these cultivators, for the most part, utilize those traditional tried and true methods when growing cannabis, with the vast majority using HID or high intensity discharge, HPS, high pressure sodium, or ceramic metal halide fixtures and fluorescent bulbs that require significantly more energy to run than LED lights and put off a lot more heat as well. Moving on to HVAC, but actually I'll take a step back, and before we tackle HVAC, I think it's important to remember that for cannabis plants to thrive, kind of like I mentioned in the beginning, really specific growing conditions have to be met. So we already covered lighting's role in that process, but another crucial component would be a cultivator's ability to remove that radiant heat that's thrown off by artificial lighting, along with latent heat or moisture that's thrown off by plants through evapotranspiration. And about 95% of the water that's taken up by plants is actually released through evapotranspiration. So pretty humid conditions out there. A lot of water that needs to be cleared out of the system. Now, when it comes to HVAC, all 6 of those greenhouses that I mentioned earlier that were audited utilized what's called wet wall technology or evaporative cooling. So for those of you who are a little unfamiliar with wet walls, I know I was kind of right out of the gate. They're essentially cooling devices that are made up of cooling pads. So you can kind of think them as honeycomb-like structures. Oftentimes they're found in an aluminum wall with a fan on the other side of that honeycomb structure. And they work by circulating water through those cooling pads that I mentioned earlier via a pump, while the fan pushes that warm air through those cooling pads. It's actually pretty effective. They can cool a greenhouse between 5 to 15 degrees, and they're very low energy compared to your standard HVAC systems out there. So our indoor participants utilize that mechanical cooling. So just think split systems or packaged units for indoor facilities, which require a significant amount of energy. Additionally, greenhouses relied on fresh air for the most part for ventilation, while the indoor facilities utilize those standalone dehumidification systems to get the water out of the system and out of the process if the HVAC systems weren't properly sized. So these standalone systems really tend to be energy hogs as well. So you can already start to see why greenhouses are much more energy efficient than indoor facilities. Next slide, please. So here you can see a list of those common energy efficiency measures that we were able to identify through the audits. They included the previously mentioned LED lighting, dehumidification upgrades, HVAC integration to eliminate those standalone dehumidification systems. Specific to greenhouses, we saw thermal curtain recommendations often, and then the use of higher efficiency circulation fans as well. But this is definitely by no means an exhaustive list of the measures that we found, but hopefully it gives you guys a taste of some common efficiency measures that we identified through these sites that are most likely common across all cultivation operations. Next slide, please. All right. So when it comes to renewable energy, we really examined 4 main options for cultivators. We had solar, wind, geothermal, and then combined heat and power, or CHP. So those reports, just to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain, included a breakdown of some of those on-site renewable energy options, cost and size breakdowns for those potential systems, analyze the property and the facility, identify those possible limitations to installing renewable energy, and there are quite a few out there, and then applicable incentives and opportunities from the participant's utility to provide some cost coverage at the end of the day. So these were not meant to be feasibility studies by any means, more preliminary renewable energy assessments to accurately estimate and clearly outline different considerations for these participants so that we can further discuss all these different options with renewable energy contractors as well as their utility providers. So kind of just sets the groundwork for them to see what's out there and what to explore further with professionals within the industries. So as you can see, solar here was almost always recognized as a great fit. As you can imagine, it requires a hefty investment, not quite as much as the other renewable energy options for sure, but cost in general within the cannabis sector can be a major barrier because they do have limited access to reasonable project financing at the end of the day, just with its federal status currently. So financing can be quite the hurdle for any project implementation at the end of the day within the sector. Also, due to those high energy needs of the cultivation facilities, you need a lot of solar panels, and in turn, a lot of space would be needed, and solar panels installed really to make a dent in the electricity that these folks were purchasing from the grid. Wind was not recognized as a good fit really for any of these participants. You can imagine it requires significant capital and financing in turn, which simply is not accessible to the industry right now. That coupled with the size and location of these facilities, wind just didn't make sense for any of these folks. You can also see here the geothermal and then the CHP results. CHP actually surprisingly turned out to be recommended to about 47% of participants, or they thought at least there was a good opportunity to adopt that, just kind of at first blush, again, not feasibility study quality. And I guess I failed to mention that these percentages within the circles are what were classified as good. So solar, 93%, wind, I mentioned 0%, geothermal, a little bit, we're in the double digits at least, and then CHP, pretty much a coin flip. I think the key takeaway really from this slide though, and from the pilot in general, was cultivators were excited and interested in at least learning more about what renewable energy options would work at their facility. But again, a lot of potential barriers to implementation, but there was quite a bit of excitement to at least explore these different renewable energy options. Next slide, please. All right, so what challenges did we identify? Well, we briefly touched on some of these throughout this presentation so far, but for cultivators, we really found there's a limited understanding of the energy performance at their facility. They also don't have access to those technical resources, again, which was the point of this pilot program, or one of the points of this pilot program. But those technical resources really are needed to help move the needle and identify and help them implement those energy efficiency opportunities. Also, when technical assistance was provided or projects were identified, again, here comes project financing creeping up. There's not much out there for them to utilize that's actually feasible right now. Last but not least, on the cultivator side, lack of relationship with their utility and rebates that were made available to them oftentimes were unknown because they didn't have that close relationship with their utility, and therefore they were not utilized, or if they did have an existing relationship, those rebates just went underutilized anyways. On the flip side, for our utility partners, a lot of limited staffing and cannabis-specific energy knowledge gaps came up, and that really restricts them from providing these cultivators with the technical resources that they need at the end of the day to, again, move the needle, implement energy efficiency, renewable energy options, or at least identify those. Also, due to the nature of that particular utility classification, these are rural co-ops. They had limited rebate budgets, again, limited staff time, limited budgets, therefore limited offerings, usually only being able to offer rebates on more efficient lighting if there were rebates available out there. So definitely welcomed by our participants, but limited in the rebate offerings there. And of course, when you have rebates for more efficient lighting, these grows have to figure out how to make that transition. It's not very easy. A lot goes into that. Transitioning from one lighting fixture to another, again, requires a lot of knowledge. You have to take into account numerous considerations associated with such a transition. As I mentioned earlier, just as an example, a lot of the heat that's thrown off by HID lights or HPS lights, metal halide, those all help with the cultivation of the plant. So if you're eliminating those, oftentimes cultivators have questions where they're going to make up that heat, how to efficiently make up that heat, what will it do to the crop at the end of the day. Next slide, please. All right, now the energy management strategies. So after we reviewed those audit findings, some short and long-term strategies were developed really to help our utility partners more fully serve their cultivation customers. Again, another point of this program. So in the short term, as you can see here, utilities could perform free rate analyses. They could offer a more detailed lighting rebate program guidance for those cultivators looking to make a switch. Here's a very key point, help with peak load management. So peak load can really drive up electric bills. So peak load management and peak load education really could help decrease electric bills for these different cultivators at the end of the day. So definitely would highlight that, as well as making sure that utilities are aware of new cultivators that come online so they can develop that relationship kind of right from the get-go, help them plan efficiently, because at the end of the day, the most effective way for cannabis cultivators to increase energy efficiency is right out of the gate. When they're in the planning stages, what equipment's the most energy efficient, what's the payback look like, because retrofitting, again, you have a lot of considerations. After you start growing a certain way, then you try to mix things up. There's a lot of hesitation that it could really throw off the yield of the crop there at the end of the day. So when you're looking at longer term or higher resource strategies for these utility partners, assisting in identifying equipment vendors, trades out there that could help these cultivators. Provide some cannabis-focused energy workshops for some maybe quarterly or semi-annual education for these folks. They could help identify third-party financing to get some of these projects off the ground if they are identified. They could also help cultivators explore renewable energy in more depth. As I mentioned previously, there was a lot of interest around renewable energy, which I think was a little bit of a surprise for the program. But I think assisting in renewable energy exploration is the first step to adoption. So definitely a longer term, higher resource strategy. That obviously comes with a lot of considerations, but something that we thought was worth focusing on. Next slide, please. And we're almost done here, I promise. So I'll just quickly run through these so we have plenty of time for questions. But key takeaways, again, indoor facilities, key drivers of energy usage in the sector, really big energy hogs at the end of the day. There's a need for dedicated technical resources for cultivators. Again, energy education, project financing. I hate to harp on the project financing, but definitely a huge barrier. There's significant barriers to efficiency gains, renewable energy adoption, but hopefully can leave you with a silver lining here, that there's a significant opportunity to increase energy efficiency within the sector. I mentioned those 1.5 million kilowatt hours just in energy efficiency that were identified, and that's just for 15 grows here in the state. And as I mentioned, kind of to kick things off, there's over 1,000 in the state. So a lot of potential out there to save energy, save dollars, and in turn, decrease the sector's environmental impact. So that's really all I had prepared for today. I think there may be one more slide just with a questions prompt. But yeah, happy to take any questions. Hopefully I can answer most of those. If I can't, I'm happy to find out the answers to them and circle back with you if it would help.
Okay, so looks like we have a question from William Owens. William, I'm going to unmute you. Let's ask.
Yeah, okay, so all this is presented relative to growing marijuana. I wonder how many of these principles and relationships and so on that you discovered to improve efficiency would also work, and to what extent would they work for the growth of edible vegetables indoors?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess I can unpack that a couple of different ways. But I also manage what's called the Agricultural Energy Efficiency Program, or AGEE program, through the Energy Office. It's essentially the same program as the one I just described. We provide those energy audits to agricultural producers. We develop those reports, renewable energy reports, and then review those and help them apply for funding. But there are a lot of similarities between growing vegetables and growing cannabis. Obviously, some intricacies there, but a lot of these principles really can be applied across different crop types at the end of the day.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully that answered your question, and I'm sorry about the AGEE plug, but I think it was relevant here. So.
Yeah, it's good to know that there's synergy going on here.
Yep.
Okay, looks like we also have a question from Mr. Martin Felker. Martin, I'll unmute you.
Okay. Yeah, my question was, I'm really puzzled at the low LED usage. And the reason is the obvious benefits of LEDs. You can fine tune them to certain frequencies or to benefit the plant growth. They put out less heat, so less HVAC use. And so why are they stuck at 33%? And what are you doing about it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there's, again, a lot to unpack, but a lot of these facilities start out growing with tried and true technologies that LEDs really are somewhat new to the cannabis industry as a whole. And there are a lot of different considerations that have to be taken into account. And you mentioned that heat aspect. A lot of that heat they're trying to get rid of from non-LED light bulbs, but not all of it, because these plants need heat, and these growers have grown a certain way for so long that they know exactly how they can utilize that heat at the end of the day. And there are a lot of different considerations with the lighting spectrum, where the lights are, a lot of things to take into account when it comes to transitioning to LED bulbs at the end of the day. But yeah, it's a huge energy saving opportunity, but there's definitely some growth that needs to happen and a learning curve before really implementing LEDs on a large scale. a lot of grows tend to just do little test plots to see how it works for a year, kind of work out the kinks. That way their entire crop is not essentially just an LED demonstration project where they're still trying to figure out exactly how to transition, where to make up this heat, and things of that nature. So hopefully that answered your question and wasn't too much all over the board, but a lot of considerations, and I think we're slowly getting there, but a lot of educational resources are needed for growers to examine, and case studies as well, as just to show this is exactly how you can do it. I've done it before. You're not necessarily jeopardizing your whole crop, but hopefully that answered your question. Happy to unpack it some more if that would help as well, but a lot of considerations at the end of the day. And yeah, I think as a state, we just continue to promote educational resources for the industry to utilize, because that's, again, a key barrier that we identified is just the lack of educational resources out there, and having a central repository for these for grows to reference moving forward. So hopefully that was helpful.
Well, I learned a lot, so yeah, it was cool. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next question is Mr. Christian Minion.
So my question was, I actually am a solar broker within the industry, and I've already been working with my uncle who is in the industry in California, but I was wondering what would be one of the best ways to get in contact with growers in this state, and being able to just get in contact with them and go over the benefits and seeing if they have the potential to save with solar, because like you said, without that space, it is hard to get where that energy efficiency needs to be. However, with the way solar technology is going, we do offer panels that produce higher wattage per panel.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of the best resource for you to utilize. There are obviously a lot of trade shows here in Colorado that are hubs that a lot of vendors tend to attend. So I would keep an eye out for any of those opportunities. Outside of that, yeah, those are the first things that come to mind, are those larger events that tend to be centralized here in Colorado for vendors, where a lot of growers are attending a lot of different conferences. So really anywhere you can get into a conference or on a webinar to network and let people know about it, I would recommend going about it that way.
Awesome. One last thing. I was wondering, you said third, so financing is obviously hard for companies because it's on the federal level, it's not quite as acceptable quite yet. I was wondering what you got, if you guys have found any different financing options that are more readily available or more willing to work with those in that industry.
Yeah, so we continue to explore that. I know there are a few different options around the country, some like energy as a service providers, but I would definitely recommend that you can follow up via email, and I can see if I can remember those names. I just can't remember those kind of off the top of my head. But yeah, it's still definitely a huge barrier to the industry, and just obviously with its federal status, a lot of different considerations for banks to take into account before they kind of dip their toe in cannabis loan offerings and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you. That answered a lot of my questions. My friend Laurent, who I also work with, is in this chat, so I'm sure he's got more solar questions for you too. Thank you.
Great.
Hey, Chris, this is Ryan. I'm the moderator on the call. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing very well. Grab out a pad and pen, if you will. I'll throw some resources your way.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, answer to your first question. The Colorado Cannabis Growers Association,
Awesome.
and their website is CCG, as in Colorado Cannabis Growers Association .wixsite, WIXSITE.com.
All right.
Okay, and
Got
then
that.
and then the next is the Marijuana Industry Group, and their website is
Okay.
their name, and their website is their name, marijuanaindustrygroup.org.
.org. That's it? Cool.
Finance wise, you need to check out Green Bank of Colorado, and their website is greenbankofco.com.
Awesome.
They
I
offer project
appreciate.
financing in renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable waste and water management, green buildings, clean transportation and waste management, and resource efficiency. So any of those, they get you connected to a green bonds program, which basically these are people that want to take their money and invest it in projects that do well. So through the Green Bank of Colorado, they connect you with investors who are interested in funding your project through bonds.
Great. That's exactly what we're looking for.
greenbankofco.com. Green Bank of
Awesome.
Colorado. Right on. Glad to be of help.
I
Okay,
appreciate
so
that so much.
you are welcome. Let's go to the next guide, Mr. Doug Ryder. Doug Ryder, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. I read somewhere, this was a year, maybe a couple of years ago, that LED lighting was not a good way to grow plants just because of it has the wrong or it doesn't have a good frequency disposition or spectral disposition. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and I can't speak all that much to it. I know that has come up before, but in short, I think there are a lot of concerns around LEDs that are unfounded, and some are for sure. I can't speak too much to the technical aspect of that, but I do know that a lot of grows around the country are starting to transition fully to LED lighting, but it is a slower process right now, but that conversion is happening. I can't speak directly to the technical aspects of that, unfortunately, but so I'm not sure exactly how helpful that response was, but we have heard that, but also realized that it can be done for sure. There are considerations that have to be taken into account, but definitely can be accomplished and is being accomplished around the country. So, again, a lot of considerations.
Yeah. Do you have a resource that might have more of the technical information on that?
Yeah, of course, right now it's slipping my mind and I didn't put my contact information on the slide. But if you leave your contact information, I'm happy to follow up with those resources. For some reason, it's slipping my mind exactly what that resource is, but I know of a dedicated resource right now, or I could follow up via email. If you leave your information, I'm happy to follow up.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try and figure out how to do that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah,
and
happy to help.
I might be able to help you out there too. Hey, Theron Makeley, are you on the call? Theron Makeley? dedicated CRES guy. Okay, so
I
Theron
think
Makeley.
I figured it out here.
Okay, yeah, Theron, Theron Makeley, Makeley, with Resilient Denver. He's our resident LED lighting guru, so can tell you everything that you've always wanted to know about LED lighting, but we're afraid to ask.
Thank
Except
you.
you weren't afraid to ask. There you go. All right. Okay, next caller, Samuel Anderson.
How are you doing, Will? So I work for the
I'm
Colorado
good.
Department of Agriculture, and I partner with Will on the Ag EE program and provide grant funding for many of the projects through that, or for some of the projects through that program. I just wanted to add a little bit of information to Martin Volker's question and to the last person. So there is a consortium of energy efficient lighting, and I was trying to look that up on my work computer just now, and I haven't been able to complete that task yet. But one of the problems with LED lighting for greenhouse, especially for cannabis growers, is that about 10 years ago, the LED lighting industry made some very big promises to cannabis growers and couldn't deliver on those promises. And there were some pretty spectacular failures that cost the cannabis industry a lot of money and gave the LED lighting industry a bad name for growers for quite a while. And I think that legacy continues. It's only in the last 3 years or so that LED manufacturers finally came together to develop some international standards for grow lights in particular. And so there is an organization that publishes those lighting standards and is trying to resolve that issue so that going forward, the grow industry will have a reliable lighting source that provides all the proper lighting spectrum and so forth. I'm not able to come up with that, the name of that consortium yet, but perhaps I can post it for you in the next few minutes.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We'd appreciate it. All right, so next on the list is Alex Prey. Alex Prey, you're on the air with WCRES.
Hey, Will, how you doing?
Hey, Alex. Doing well. How are you?
I'm here to answer Sam's question, I think, or fill in Sam's blank. Believe he may be referencing the Design Lights Consortium, which is designlights.org, has an entire category of horticultural lighting, and they do normal lighting rating as well, but that's sort of an industry standard for qualified, tested, proven lighting technology.
Well, cool.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Next up is Carmen Azzaretti.
I actually was just going to talk about the Design Light Consortium, but I did earlier have a question about, is your organization planning to create all of these technical resources? Are you planning to work with other organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I failed to mention, but right now, based off of the pilot program, we're working with our key stakeholders to develop a plan of action for energy management strategies within the sector moving forward. And that's one item that we are reviewing further. So nothing quite yet, but we are discussing that as a potential option.
Have you heard of the Resource Innovation Institute?
I have, yes. Yeah.
Because they have a
Yeah,
lot
they
of
have.
similar resources.
Yeah, they have a lot of great resources, and yeah, I would steer folks that direction. Right now, they've been working really hard to develop a lot of those resources and have a lot of those resources. So I would definitely check out RII. Yeah, and
Thank you.
thank you again for reminding me of that. All these names are just slipping right now. So
You just taught me something. I had no idea what Resources Innovation Institute is, but I'm plugging it in. Cool. Thank you. And the next guy, or next person on the list is Mike Wolf.
My first question is I lost power in my neighborhood, so I was wondering if there was a chance that the slides would be available. I finally was able to connect on my phone, but yeah, we lost power out here in the Highlands. So is that an option to get some of this data that I missed?
yeah, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is being recorded as well, so you can definitely review that recording and catch the whole presentation. Sorry you missed some of it.
You're correct. It is being recorded, and we can, I guess, maybe put your email address in the chat, and I guess that might be the best way to communicate with us. And Ryan, if you could preserve it, because I don't see the chat. I don't have any way of capturing that. And then maybe we can forward that to Lindsay, and then Lindsay will, we can make that available to you.
Okay, good question.
That'd be awesome. So I can actually help a couple of the other people. I do a lot of, I'm a PE, I do designs for a lot of grow houses, and I can answer some of the LED question in addition to the concerns that was brought up by another gentleman about the last 3 years only having decent standards. We've done a lot of energy modeling in these places, and it cannot be understated that even with really efficient ballasts and really efficient LEDs and great HVAC, how much energy is used. In addition, there's not much other overhead. I mean, there's water, there's rent, and limited personnel tending the plants. So, you know, I look into a lot of different options with some of the more cutting edge options with tackling the refrigeration angle is kind of where I focus my career right now. But to answer the question about why it takes up so much energy compared to total operating costs, the buildings are basically lighthouses with air conditioning to cool the lights. So, and then another gentleman brought up a question about financing. I would also look into a company called CPACE. They specifically do green lending for any kind of business. That's C as in Charlie, PACE as in instead of PACE. And the only criteria is you have to actually kind of prove that the amount of added monthly expense is less than the amount of energy saved every month. And the other catch is the project has to be at least $200,000 in valuation, but that's usually pretty easy to hit. My only other question that I might ask is, moving forward, is there, yeah, I'm trying to tackle this pretty hard, but it kind of feels like people like me are few and far between to tackle some of these energy problems, especially with cold storage and marijuana grow facilities where they use a lot of energy per square foot. Does the coalition plan to get people together somehow, like engineers who are working on this, to you know, create specific incentive programs to sort of educate these growers? Because a lot of these growers are timid to invest in capital, obviously because of the federally illegal situation. And I feel like if there was a place we could point them that was sort of outside of the contracting engineering realm, it might encourage them to sort of research and come to these conclusions on their own.
And would you mind repeating just that second part there? Sorry, I think I missed that.
Yeah, I apologize if my connection is bad. So basically what I'm asking is the biggest hurdle I run into is sort of an education curve and investment. These growers are afraid to invest because of the fact that it's not federally legal, although that is, I've noticed the attitude is changing as more states sign up. But I'm wondering if the state has any plans to create, you know, somewhat of a coalition to bring in a network of builders and engineers who who specialize in this sort of thing, and give an information resource for some of these actual grower operations, so that they can go there and almost as a third party, the state would be acting to sort of help with the education curve upon what options these growers have. If, for example, when the LED lights was brought up, it was pretty clear that there's some fear now because of what happened 10 years ago. So if we could point these growers to a place and be like, here's the latest and greatest, is that something that your program plans on doing?
Yeah, I would unfortunately say that, again, we're still identifying strategies moving forward. That's definitely a strategy that we're examining, but we don't have any imminent offerings around that specifically. But again, we're still examining the best path forward.
Okay.
Okay, so Christian Minion has said he can help with that question. So I'm going to unmute. Let's see, Christian, for you.
Hey there. Just to help with that last question. Like I said, we're there's very few I've noticed. I don't know if you know any more than myself. There's very few solar guys out there right now trying to contact the cannabis industry, I feel like. Or it just doesn't get presented right just because they don't have access to the proper panels or right wattage per panel. So with where the technology is at currently, and also hopefully through the help of those resources you gave me in the Green Bank, guys like me and LaRon, who's also in this chat, are trying to basically help growers be less afraid of that investment that they need to make in order to save a lot of money on energy. So I just wanted to kind of put myself out there. There are guys out there in the solar industry that are trying to tap in, but it obviously is a little bit untapped currently.
Well, I've done some energy modeling with solar. One of the biggest problems with solar is that the meter's reading every 15 minutes, and a lot of energy expenditure, about 90% of their bill, is based on peak, not based on demand, or usage. So if it's cloudy for 15 minutes and it's blazing hot out, so the ACs are pumping and they've got all the lights on, they're still going to hit peak. However, that said, I am by no means a solar expert, so I don't know if you would be willing to tell me what your email is. I can reach out to you personally, and possibly, we could collaborate. I could do some designs and you could do the contracting.
Sorry about that. I didn't hear any of the last 1 minute of anything just said. I don't know if that was my end or not.
Hello?
I won't bore everybody with the point about
Yeah.
why solar is possibly problematic with grows, but I'll just include the part that I'm not. Solar is not my expertise, and if you want to state your email, I'll reach out to you personally outside of this webinar, and perhaps we could collaborate on a you contract, we engineer sort of basis.
Absolutely. My email, do you have a pen and paper?
Yeah, I'm ready to go here.
Okay. My email is Christian, CHRISTIN .minion, MINION @valorroof.com.
Got it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, would love to chat with you more about how we can figure out how to get solar where it needs to be for these type of operations.
Great, and this is Lindsay. I'm just hopping back on here. I love, Will, that you've prompted all this collaboration between our members, and love that everybody is so excited about this and trying to solve the problem of making our cannabis industry here in Colorado more energy efficient, but I do want to be sensitive to your time. Will, I know you've been very generous with us to come and speak tonight, and so just wanted to jump in to just wrap things up and say big thank you to Greg and Ryan on the CRES side for supporting with the Q&A, and big thank you to all of the participants who've asked questions. Thanks to you all for joining, and then big round of applause to you, Will. Thank you for the presentation and for facilitating such a wonderful discussion. We loved having you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of give you the lowdown on what we've done. And yeah, thank you guys again. Really appreciate you taking some time on your Thursday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a wonderful night and stay warm and safe out there with all this snow.